3 minutes. It's 3 minutes to 11. Doesn't mean we have to start at 11.
Would you like to invite our board to sound?
I can do that.
I'm going to make a couple of announcements before that. So let's do this. Awesome. You got words though, right?
I've got translated words here, yes. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Westside Unitarian Universalist Church. We are a religious community that nurtures each person's unique path of spiritual development as we live our values through service to each other and to the larger community. If you are here in person with us today in the building, we welcome you. And if you're joining us on YouTube, as the live stream goes out, then we welcome you. And if you're watching later, at any time during the future, we also welcome you. You are part of this community. I would like to draw your attention to the announcements that are in the order of service and that were scrolling on your screen earlier. And particularly I would like to mention, if you are a person who attends spiritual practice that happens before this service, or if you think that you might like to do that sometime in the future, we're making a slight change to the schedule in October. It has been the way that we've done things is that we start at 9:30 and go through to 10:15, and we've had like a little bit of a smorgasbord of different things that we've been doing. We're making a change starting in October October that from 9:30 to 10, we're having some more active, physical-based spiritual practices like drumming. Jim Carney will be running some Qigong, which is kind of like a Tai Chi-like meditative martial arts practice. Bridget will be doing some yoga, and that will run from 9:30 till 10, and then from 10 till 10:30 we will have a more seated, non-active meditation. So if you just want to do a meditation, you can just show up at 10. And if you would like to engage in some more active spiritual practice, then you can come at 9:30. So you can see, if you need any more information about that, you can see myself or Reverend Carol or Bridget, and we'll be glad to fill you in. Are there any other announcements that I might have missed out on? I'll have to do something about this because it's crazy. There you go. That's better. Anybody have any other announcements? Okay, then Reverend Carol has some for us.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you. Okay, now you all can do better than that. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good to see you all this morning. I am Reverend Carol Bodeau. I am privileged to serve here as minister. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. If you're with us virtually, I want to specifically say good morning to you, whether you are watching us right now or in the future. We're glad you're with us today. I also want to take a moment to just say thank you to Sandra. Can we have a little bit of applause for Sandra? Sandra plays the most beautiful gathering music, and often we're not really paying much attention. She's mentioned to. So the first is that many of you know that Judy Burgett passed a week ago, and though her family has asked that we not have any kind of formal memorial service for her, that is not something they want to do. The board has been discussing ways we might remember Judy and others who are not otherwise noted in our memorial garden. So the board, here's what the board is planning to vote to approve at their meeting in another week. We plan to use the occasion of Judy's passing to set up a fund to provide permanent seating in the memorial garden in memory of all Westside members and friends whose names are not otherwise displayed there. So there will be more information coming about that, but you will be able to make donations in Judy's memory and in the memory of other people who aren't. Our memorial garden is specifically has plaques that mention the names of people who are interred in our memorial garden. But we are going to create ways to remember other people who aren't on those plaques and to remember those who aren't named otherwise out there. So that's something you will be hearing more about. I also want to let you know about what we call Adult RE, Religious Exploration Program, that's coming up. For those of you who are here with the physical order of service in your hands, you will see this listed as anti-racism and diversity, equity and inclusion. So starting in October, we're going to be running a course. It'll probably go well into the winter as we do this work. We're going to be using this book. It's called Do the Work, an anti-racist activity book by W. Kamau Bell and Kate Schatz. This book was recommended by our friends at The Bottom, which is the African American Community Center in Knoxville that we partner with and support. They recommended this when I said to them, what would you recommend that we use as a way for our congregation to start doing work, educating ourselves about anti-racism? And they said, take this book and use it and do the work together. So there are sign-up forms in the back of the room for if you're physically present. There also is a QR code. You can sign up on the website. There are multiple ways to sign up. We're going to be doing this, and you don't necessarily have to attend every session. You can get the book and come when you can come. The dates, the first few dates are listed in the order of service and on the website. I have purchased a few of these books. We've got, and if we need to buy a few more, we will. If you're able to buy the book for yourself, that is great. But if you are not, you can indicate on the form, the registration, that you would like to have one of the books that we have purchased to use. So if you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to ask me. And I really hope that lots of people will sign up. Yes, Elizabeth.
Amazon has them, but also you can order them from the bottom.
Yes, you can get them directly from the Bottom's bookstore, which is a great way to support the Bottom. Okay? Okay. Anything else? I think the book is $22. It's 22. It says $22.95 on the back of it. And again, I have 5 copies that I've already purchased for use by the congregation, and I am happy to purchase more if we need more than 5 copies. Okay? All right. Chris is going to invite our bowl to sound because he is the magic bowl guy.
The flaming chalice is a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, and we light the chalice at the beginning of each service to mark a transition into that special sacred time. The chalice is a symbol. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance. A faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice. A faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all her people. A faith that demands a living out of goodness. A faith that requires thoughtfulness. A faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of that spark within each of us.
So many of you know that in our spiritual practices in the mornings before our regular service, we often engage in meditation. And we do that as a way to bring a kind of presence, centered, calm presence to ourselves and to bring that into the larger world. So that's something that can be hard to do in the busy flow of our lives, to be really calm enough and slowed down enough to really pay attention to what's happening. This morning, we did a meditation that was focused on becoming aware of the flowing of the seasons and how it changes our moods and our emotions, how our bodies respond to those changes. Sometimes we're so busy thinking and judging and being in the future or the past that we're not actually fully participating in the experience of right now. The point of meditation is to cultivate a kind of awareness in ourselves that is separate, and this is an interesting idea to think about, the possibility that you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, you are not your physical sensations. These are things we experience, but the I am that I am is somehow bigger than that. Because somebody is observing that you had an emotion. Somebody is observing the physical sensation. Somebody can become conscious of the thought and be aware of the thought. So the purpose of meditation is to gain an awareness that gives us freedom and flexibility to respond to our thoughts, to respond to our physical experiences, to respond to our emotions, rather than just reacting to them. The gift of that kind of awareness is a certain stillness, a certain presence that allows us to not ignore those things or to impulsively react to them in ways we can't control. So today, we're talking about what it means to craft our own theologies. We're going to talk about how each of us is a theologian. And I'm going to explain to you why I think that's true, that you're a theologian. And one of the practices that can help us be conscious about the theologies we're living in the world is just present moment awareness. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a few minutes together to practice a little meditation, a little present moment awareness. And what I'm going to do in a moment is I'm going to invite Chris to play his flute, and he's just going to play while I talk a little bit, and I'm going to guide you through a little bit of a meditation, and then he's just going to play for a few moments more to allow you to listen and reflect. So whenever you're ready, Chris. As he's getting his flute ready, I invite you to center, wiggle yourself in your chair. If you have your legs crossed, consider just sitting really solidly, putting both feet on the floor. If you're comfortable, if that's comfortable for you, that can kind of help us come more fully into our bodies. Do what's comfortable for your body, and take a couple deep breaths. Allow the sound of the flute to echo or resonate in your body. Notice if the sound of the flute in any way impacts how you feel. Becoming aware of yourself as an individual, just you in your body. And now notice that you're in a room with other people. Notice if you're feeling tension or anxiety. If this practice makes you feel comfortable or uncomfortable. If you're wondering what your neighbor's thinking or doing, how you react to doing this in a room with other people. Now we're going to go a little further out even than this room. Imagine yourself as part of a family or a community or a city or a state. Imagine all the people you're connected to. And go even further out. Imagine all the nature you're connected to. All the life forms that intersect with your life. Imagine yourself on this planet, the whole planet. Just you in the midst of a community, in the midst of an ecosystem on this planet. Now go even bigger than the planet. Imagine yourself as part of our solar system and our galaxy and this universe. And notice if that changes how you feel. And now slowly imagine bringing yourself back from that far reach of that bigness, coming back to just this planet Earth. Back to this town, this state, this room, this body, this particular moment. Taking a few more breaths just to notice how you are both an entire world unto yourself and also a tiny part of a much bigger reality. Just allowing yourself to slowly wiggle your fingers or toes as you open your eyes. Now, first, I would invite you to just notice how you feel having done that particular practice. How was that for you? You know, sometimes for some of us, that kind of extended non-action or awareness can make us feel restless. It can make us feel sometimes, for some people that's agitating. For other people, it's very calming and soothing. Just notice how that was for you. The practice of cultivating that kind of stillness and presence often gives rise to all kinds of sensations, thoughts, or emotions that are otherwise suppressed as we go through our daily lives. So as you're rushing to the store and driving in traffic and getting errands run and answering phone calls and dealing with the problems of day-to-day life, that kind of awareness is usually the last thing you're thinking about. Right? We're so busy. And we are so identified with the actions, the doings, the thoughts, the busyness. We identify that that's who we are. And we get caught in that. But if we practice these kinds of present moment awarenesses often enough, they allow us to reflect more on what I sometimes call the big questions. Why are we here? Is there even a reason? What is the point of life? Is there a point? Is there value in it? What is the value? Why did it happen in the first place? How does this all work? Or more personal, what do I really care about? Is how I'm spending my time really what I really care about? Do I feel like I'm spending my time doing things that are truly meaningful to me? Or if I stop and get out of the rush and the run and the busyness, do I feel like, gosh, I wish I were spending my time other ways? In between the fretting and problem-solving thoughts and actions of our day, in the midst of constant reactions and interactions, Those kinds of questions lurk just below the surface for all of us. Often they only manifest when we look at other people, like, why are they doing that? What are they thinking? That's clearly not a good thing for them to do. Right? We often manifest these kinds of questions in assessments of other people's behavior. But if we slow down, they're there for all of us. So I would posit that every single person in this room, every single human on this planet, is a theologian. How many of you have ever thought of yourself as a theologian before? Awesome. Well, you know, someone who's gone to seminary, yeah, it's cheating. But Baz next to him, I agree. You thinking of yourself, Alice thinking of yourself as a theologian, right? Us thinking, did you raise your hand too, Chris?
Mark did that.
Mark did. Okay, awesome. So some of us think consciously, like, I am thinking about the big questions. These matter to me. These are questions I am asking, and I'm making decisions about them. Most of us, most of the time, are completely unconscious of those actions. You might think that a theologian, many of us, is someone who went to seminary or who does some kind of theological writing as a profession or thinking as a profession. But I don't think it's possible to be a conscious human being and not be a theologian, because those questions are always with us. And of course, the more academic definition of a theologian is someone who studies or professionally engages in theological thinking in a formal way. But my definition is that theology is the study or exploration of the big questions. And every single person in this room has asked one or more of those big questions at some time. Is there a God? Is there not a God? If there is, why in the world does he, she, they let bad things happen? If there isn't, why in the world does the world exist? Why do we exist? What kinds of values are the real values we should follow? Is there a way to get it right? Is there a way to get it wrong? Who's going to judge us on the right or wrongness of things? Right? All of us think about these questions to one degree or another, consciously or unconsciously. And our decisions, conscious or unconscious, about these questions shape all of our actions, whether we recognize it or not. So even if you're an atheist, someone whose religious stance is that there is no deity or transcendent reality, that's a religious stance. It's an answer to big questions. And it's a different one than the answers that someone who identifies an agnostic would give. Someone who says, I don't know, I'm willing to not assert answers to those questions. Not being religious is still a stance on religion. It is still an answer to the big questions. So all of those are forms of theological thinking. In Unitarian Universalist circles, we often teach a class that's called Building Your Own Theology. And it's based in the idea that all of us, and this is particularly true of UUs, tend to craft or create belief systems for ourselves rather than adopting pre-cut belief systems, right? Isn't that something that Unitarian Universalists are kind of proud of? Like, right? We're pretty proud of that. Many of us come from other religious traditions, which we have partially or totally rejected because we didn't want to adopt the pre-cut beliefs that came with that system. And even lifelong UUs reshape and refine their beliefs. After all, isn't it true that we say that we encourage a search for truth and meaning? That's what we say we do. We search for truth and meaning. We do not say that we practice holding firm to long-held dogma, right? That's not what we say we do. We search and we shape. So here's the question for today. What is your theology? And how conscious have you been in crafting it? Often, it seems to me, we create theologies of what I would call rejection. Often our theologies are all about what we're not. I sure don't believe that. Religion is hogwash. I don't believe any of it. I certainly don't believe in that thing or that stance or that attitude. All of us have things that we are saying no to theologically. But sometimes that's as far as we go with our theology. We can have pretty strong opinions about things that are statements about what's not true, rather than going the next step and asking, well, then what is true? Now, we might also create theologies of what I would call ambivalence or avoidance. I don't know. I'd rather not think about it. There's no point in thinking about it anyway. Why bother? That's silly. That's not relevant. Very popular in UU circles. Okay? But even then, these are theological assertions. We think they're non-theological, but in fact, they are theological assertions. The person who asserts all religion is to be rejected may have a very deep faith in something else. Science, for example, and I do mean a faith in science, because even science can become an emotional or psychological framework, a grounding rather than just intellectual knowledge. It can become a reality framework that we use to make decisions. Not specific scientific facts, but the thinking or the psychological framework of scientific approaches. The person who acts on the belief, conscious or unconscious, that thinking about big questions, maybe, that it's like, I don't know, do I need to even do that? They may be making conscious or unconscious assumptions about individual power. So, for example, there's no point, I don't need to think about this, may be connected to my perspectives aren't going to make a difference in reality anyway, right? I mean, what is, and it's not, what I think about it isn't really relevant. Someone else might have a very different theological stance about, wow, if I think about it, just thinking about it makes a huge impact. So the core assumption of this building your own theology framework is that we are all of us, all of the time, acting like theologians, whether we recognize it or not, and that goes beyond simple questions like, what church did you go to as a child? Now, some of you participated last week in our first spiritual discussion conversation rooted in building your own theology, and we start with questions like, what church did you go to as a child, if any? What religion or religious perspective do you say that you hold now? What would you call yourself? So let's start with that question. Just contemplate that in your own mind. What would you call yourself? You don't need to answer that out loud, but do you think of yourself as an agnostic, an atheist, a Jew, a Christian, a Buddhist, a none of the above? Those are questions about religious identity. But go beyond that. What core assumptions do you have about reality? Do you believe that your life, that your presence is impacting the greater whole? And if so, how? Do you believe that you have influence on things far from you or only up close? Do you believe that there is some larger transcendent reality? Do you believe that your emotions make a difference in the world around you? These don't seem maybe at the first glance like theological questions, but they are. They are absolutely theological questions. I have so many conversations in any given week about choices about how to handle things. What should I do about my boss? What should I do about my partner? What should I do about my next career step? What should I do about, my relationship with my family of origin? And we ask those questions like they're problem-solving issues, and every single one of them is a theological question. Because we make our decisions how to respond to those situations from our core theologies, whether they are acknowledged or not. So how do you answer questions in your day-to-day life? What are the most grounding beliefs that you have about reality that frame your decision making? And how conscious are they? How reactive are you and how responsive are you? One of the purposes of meditation is to help us become responsive, to become aware of the assumptions we're making, and to make conscious choices about them. A few years ago, I had a really powerful realization. And mind you, this realization came to me at the age of about 55. So I had been an ordained minister for over a decade, a religious professional for going on 20 years, a student of spirituality for about 40 years, and had been actively involved in religious practice by that time for 55 years, my entire life. So you could actually say for sure that I was a theologian, and I knew it, because by that point I had been professionally engaged in theological work for a long time. And you would think that I was very self-aware about my theology and that I was making choices based on a conscious theology. And then one day, I had this huge aha moment. I had rejected the story that's relevant here is the Garden of Eden story. Is everyone roughly familiar with the Garden of Eden story? The Garden of Eden story, the part of it that's relevant here is that Adam and Eve are in the garden, and God has assigned them to enjoy themselves and love life, but don't eat from that one tree. And Eve eats the apple, convinces Adam to eat some of the apple, and all Hades breaks loose. Okay? Right? Now, I had studied that story. I had studied the origins of that story. I had made my decisions about that story, all those things. I had put that away a long time ago. The idea that Eve was the cause of all human suffering, having eaten the apple and thereby incurred divine wrath, causing essentially never-ending punishment for humans, I had rejected way back when I was going to Catholic church as a teenager. Okay? However, then one day I had this shocking realization. I realized, and I could not tell you at this moment how I came to this. Like one day, like the curtain got pulled back, and I realized I was still living unconsciously from a theology rooted in that story, rooted in the inferiority and the problematic nature of being a woman. I had taken this theology, this belief in so deeply that I was totally unaware of how much it shaped my day-to-day choices. So, for example, I felt responsible for the happiness of everyone around me because I was in charge of fixing all their suffering, just as Eve was in charge of causing all the suffering. I felt bad about eating. After all, like at the root of this story is that women shouldn't eat stuff that's good. We don't pay much attention to how deeply this story impacts the epidemic of eating disorders we have in our culture, but it's in there. I felt so many things in my body that were rooted to all the things Eve was bad for being and doing. Because, of course, from the time I was a tiny child, that theology had been conveyed to me as how things really are. That's just reality. I had internalized one other really deep message about that, which is that human life is suffering. That this earth is fallen, and that it kind of sucks to be here. That it's going to be hard, and it's going to be difficult, because after all, it was awesome, and then it got really bad. That had conditioned me to focus on all the things going wrong. It had conditioned me to focus on what's bad, that this earth is bad, rather than recognizing a simple fact, which we might not consider. We actually do still live in the Garden of Eden. We actually still do. we actually do still live in a place of incredible beauty, incredible richness, where I think it's poet Wendell Berry who says, most things don't harm us. If we just slow down and look at things a certain way, it changes everything, right? How many of you did not have to raise your hands, but just ask yourself, how many of us actually have the core assumption that things are bad and hard more often than they're easy and good? We act like everything's meant to be a problem to be solved most of the time. And that's just one example of how unconscious theologies shape our lives when we're not even thinking about it. Now, if you want to explore options to that particular story, I would encourage you to look at a fabulous book by theologian and excommunicated priest, Matthew Fox. Matthew Fox was a Catholic priest who got excommunicated for writing and talking in ways that countered those traditional theologies. His book about that story is called Original Blessing. It's a wonderful reimagining of it all. It's his answer to the doctrine of original sin. But the question to ask yourself is this: what are your unconscious theologies? How are you practicing theology without doing it in an awake kind of way? I know that we are coming up on a really important election. And we are very conscious of the theologies of people being expressed in the ways they are reacting and responding to this election. It can be helpful to ask ourselves the question, what unconscious or conscious theologies are we grounded in? What theologies or assumptions about reality, the big questions, are motivating how we act, react, and respond right now? And how was that theology built? So I was focused mostly on, I went to seminary, I rejected the Catholic Church. I was focused on the part of my journey, the building of my theology, that came later in my life, and hadn't paid quite as much attention as I might have needed to the parts that I took in unconsciously early in my life. So what has the journey of building your theology looked like? What came to you uninvited? You might also ask this, here's a curious question, homework assignment for you. When you're watching television, ask yourself, what unconscious theologies are being conveyed? Every time you watch a Red Bull commercial, or a Vols game, or a murder mystery, or a true crime show, what are the theologies? What are the statements about reality, truth, and values that are being conveyed, and how conscious are you of what you're taking in? Are you building your theology consciously out of materials you actively choose and want to engage, or are we building our theologies unconsciously out of things handed to us that we're not really thinking about? That story of me and the Garden of Eden showed me how profoundly my life, choices as simple as what I eat, who I love, how I choose my actions in any given day, how I respond to problems when they arise, everything in my life was being shaped by unconscious theologies. And whether we call ourselves religious or not, we have these assumptions. So let's become conscious of them to the best of our ability. If you want to talk about that more or explore that more, First Sunday potlucks are going to be followed with spiritual discussions, conversations, and for the foreseeable future, we're going to talk about what kinds of theologies we're building, individually and collectively, where they're coming from, and how they shape our lives. So I invite you to join in those conversations. I will tell you that in October, on October 6th, we're going to be talking about theologies of celebration, because our potluck that day is going to be a celebratory one. We'll be doing some celebrations of things that have gone well and that are happening here at Westside. And so following that, we're going to talk about the positive parts of our theologies. We often focus on the yucky stuff that we inherited, or the things we rejected, but we're going to talk about positive theology. So please join us for that. And if you are interested in learning more about the actual curriculum, and you would be interested in getting the book, Building Your Own Theology, just let me know. How we make meaning is central to our humanness. And I will tell you that I have a deep belief that how we make meaning in the next few months is going to matter a lot. As we struggle through this election cycle, as we look at the relationships that are playing out on our television screens and in our neighborhoods and in our families, how we make meaning can be a very, very powerful tool for building the world we dream of or the world we fear. So I invite you to become conscious theologians. May it be so. One of the ways that we live out our theology is by the ways we do what we call justice work, the ways we try to make an impact in the world. Most of us, if you're in a UU congregation, you are a person who thinks that it's a good thing to make an impact in the world. There are other theologies that are not like that. There are theologies that say, don't. Action is not, that non-action is better than action. There are theologies that say action is better than non-action. There are theologies that say something in the middle. One of the things we do as a congregation is we strive to choose actions that are rooted in love and that serve to affirm life. So, right now, we are currently still supporting our larger denomination with our contributions. So you are always invited to make financial contributions to this institution. You can make an ongoing pledge. If you would like to make a one-time donation, there is a box in the back of the room. There's a QR code on it if you want to do it that way. There's a QR code on the screen. There's a QR code on our website. So financial contributions matter, and so do physical actions. We always are inviting people to join in helping us with the work we do. If you have an interest in, for example, maybe you want to become an active theologian. This is going to be my plug for the worship team. Taking this opportunity for a public service announcement. This chancel is what this is called, this chancel is meant to be a space where we as a community share our theologies. It's not just for me or the few people that you often see up here. If you are interested in participating in our worship team, helping to shape the topics we talk about, helping to shape the services, the structure, the things that are happening, if you are interested in being part of that, please let me know or Chris know or some other member of the worship team, because we are always looking for more voices and more perspectives. So I invite you to consider being part of the community in that way. All right, take a deep breath. I know that was sort of serious. I also know that I'm looking at a room. We are set up this way today, not because I wanted to be dictatorial. Okay? We are set up this way today because there's a concert tonight, and we didn't want to have to move the chairs. This is not a theological statement. The room is not a theological statement today. But it often is a theological statement. Whether we're looking at each other, whether we're sitting, whether the worship associate and the speaker are sitting down there or up here, that's a theological statement. We're about to make a theological statement of equality. So I invite you to rise if you feel inclined and to deny the hierarchy of the chairs. Move around. and join hands if you would like to do so. You know, one of the funny things about Unitarian Universalism is we have all kinds of theological opinions. I cannot tell you how many times I have been told by other active theologians, never to do this. And I sort of said, well, we're going to do it anyway. Because as a community, I've heard the reinforced message over and over again that people like it. Now, you are a theologian, and if you don't like it, I want you to tell me about it. Maybe after we're done. Okay? But there's a theology here that says it doesn't matter what the chairs are arranged like. It doesn't matter what the structure is. It doesn't matter how we sit. Every single one of us is part of this community. Each of us matters, and we are all connected. So, we're going to try something fun. Okay. All right. I know that there are multiple beginning points in this line. So Kay and Yetta and Nathan. Here's what I want you to do. When I say go, you're going to start the squeeze. And you're going to pass the squeeze down your line, okay? So we're going to pass the squeeze down each of our individual rows. So I'm going to squeeze Sandra's hand, and then she's going to squeeze Sherry's, and so on. So don't squeeze until the squeeze comes to you, okay? Go. Oh, you guys in the middle are, okay, let's see. Lily, will you start a squeeze for your circle? Thank you. Okay. You guys are like your own little self-contained unit there. Okay, has everybody been squeezed? Awesome. Sometimes it takes multiple theologians to kick off a spark something. Every one of us matters. Every one of us makes choices based in deep values. Let us be the agents of positive, loving, life-affirming choices. Let's go live a theology of love uniting us, acts of caring connecting us, and our community thriving so that we can contribute to the larger community thriving. May it be so. Go in peace, go in passion.